Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports Day Insider presented by the Dallas Morning News. I am Kevin Sherrington, joined by my pals Evan Grant and David Moore. I'm out here in lovely Surprise with Evan. He picked me up at the airport yesterday, took us to the Fat Ox in Scottsdale. David, you ever been there?
I have not. I've been to Scottsdale. I have not been to that. I know exactly where the restaurant is, though. I've been down in other restaurants and maybe bars in that area. But
Maybe.
maybe.
Yeah.
But I'm hurt. Y'all didn't invite me to the Rangers Casa.
Yeah, I know. Well, we'd get you out here, but apparently there's some news that might be breaking that says that, you wouldn't be in the market.
We'll see about that at some point.
Yeah, we'll see. It's a really great place. We've been here several times. As a matter of fact, I've been out here with the lovely wife when we were out here for one of her junkets. So,
but it is now the second best Italian restaurant in Scottsdale, Kevin.
Yeah, I know. Evan is big on this other one. Is it Elephantine? Is that the name of the place, Evan?
Elefante.
Elefante?
Yeah,
okay.
And the good news is Elefante has two locations, one in Santa Monica and one in Scottsdale, and it will have a third in October in Dallas. On
Really?
Cedar Springs, yeah, in a new office condo building that's going up over there by Cedar Springs and McKinney, and it's one of the best Italian meals I've ever had. And I'm just going to say this is what will, of course, sell everybody. I had the single best vegetable dish I have ever had in my life.
But that was broccolini, and you skewed toward broccolini anyway.
No, there was. You know what, Kevin? This will make you excited. It had
Was it charred?
pesto on it.
Oh well, that's it. You can put pesto on anything, and I'd like it. That's how my mind works. I love pesto. All right, that does it for our food podcast this week. We hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll come back next week when we'll talk about what we got at Applebee's the last time.
Who likes food talk?
Oh, I know. Who doesn't like food? I like eating food better than talking about it. But all right, so let's talk about what's been going on lately. Obviously, there's always something going on. It's one of the reasons why we like to have this podcast, because in this market there is always something going on. And so what's happened recently is that DeMarcus Lawrence couldn't walk out the door quietly, and I don't know if he really meant to say that he wasn't going to win a Super Bowl in Dallas. I saw the comment and it, as he was actually making it, and I didn't get the impression he meant that in a bad way. I don't know. Maybe there's different ways you could take it. But certainly one particular defensive end for the Cowboys, the other one, the one that's left, Micah Parsons took it poorly and called it rejection and envy, and this is some clown bleep. And then that caused.
He actually did do bleep. He didn't actually do the word that you would.
Oh, is that right?
In there, he actually did do bleep. Yeah.
Yeah. So he and DeMarcus got into it at that point, at which, with DeMarcus saying that, if you weren't spending so much time tweeting, maybe and on podcasts, and maybe you could we win some more. And that's one of the reasons why I'm leaving, which I don't think it has anything to do with why DeMarcus Lawrence was leaving. It was because of any kind of problems that he might have had with Micah Parsons. But it was just something to say when a guy's attacking you. What do you think, David?
Yeah, and I was, initially on the comment, I was like you, saying that I didn't necessarily believe he was taking a swipe and firing a shot across the bow, saying, "Well, I know the Cowboys aren't going to win in the next few years, so why not go up here?" I initially took it. I thought there was some ambiguity there, that it was like, "Well, no, now that I'm here, this is where I want to win a title."
Exactly. That's what I thought. Yes.
That's how I took it. Then I talked to several people who were closer to DeMarcus than I am, and it was universal, like, "Oh no, he was taking a shot." So, he was upset that they didn't make him more of an offer. As he said, he wanted to end his career here. But it was very striking, him and Zach Martin were part of the same draft class. And 8 days after Zach Martin holds a press conference at the facility to announce his retirement and reflect on his career with the Cowboys and how meaningful his time was there, it was very striking 8 days later to see how differently Demarcus Lawrence, who was also part of that draft class, went out. And as I said at the time, look, is there the the Jones family gets this. This is an emotional game, an emotional sport. They really do kind of turn the other cheek when players make comments because they know a lot of it. A lot of it is just the frustration of. They know a lot of what Demarcus said was because he was just frustrated that he wasn't able to end his career here, and they couldn't come on an agreement at the end, and he took it personally. So I think while there may be upset in the organization now, I think that will dissipate, and it's not something they will hold against Demarcus Lawrence over time. That being said, it was interesting when they assigned numbers to the new guys they signed yesterday. They've already given away Demarcus Lawrence's number. Solomon Thomas has it.
Wow.
So,
Okay.
so not only not retire the number, but couldn't give it away fast enough to one of the guys they signed coming in. So, again, I don't think there are any burned bridges. And Demarcus came back a couple days later with his own flowery, well thought out, not emotional comment about how much his time in Dallas meant, and how he'll always be a Cowboy and all this. So that was, I would say, the process has already started there, but it deteriorated as soon as Parsons jumped in, and Lawrence picked at a sore that won't go away, which is Parsons' status in the Cowboys locker room and how he is viewed by his teammates.
Yes, and then that's what we're going to talk about now. Micah Parsons is unequivocally one of the five best players in the NFL.
And he's the best player on the Cowboys.
Oh, there's no question
There's
about
no
that.
question about that.
He might be the best player in this century on the Cowboys. It maybe further than that. I don't know if there's any players who make as much of an impact just by themselves in a game as he does, and a guy who's getting double and triple teamed and still makes the impact that he does. He is a game wrecker. There's no question about that. But there are a lot of questions about the way he goes about his business, and this is one of those things that I want us to talk about it because um, you know before this century, athletes weren't available in social media and all the things they can do now, and people have grown up in social media now. Certainly, all of my children grew up with it, and it's just second nature to them. And there's a question about, well, should this guy be should he be hosting a podcast on Tuesdays on the players' day off? And I know all the old schoolers would say, no, this is a bad idea. It's a distraction for the team, and you don't need that kind of thing. And I've always hated the word distraction in sports because it's so overused.
Yeah.
You could be a mass murderer and someone referred to that as a distraction on the team. And I don't like to equate that
An off
with
the field diversion. Yeah.
with a guy that maybe is late to meetings a couple of times. I think it's a legitimate question to ask about Mike, and especially if you're about to give him $40+ million a year. Is it a good idea to be giving your biggest contracts to guys who aren't leaders? Like Evan can comment on Juan Gonzalez when he was the Rangers' highest paid player, and Juan was in no way, shape, or form any kind of leader on that team, and I think and I think Juan, frankly, had a little difficulty trying to accept that role.
Well, I think the biggest issue there is that we're talking about something 25 years ago, and the world has changed, and how players are viewed has changed. And at that point in time, I think that was part and parcel of it. I don't think it is anymore. I think that, you know, we're spending as much time here talking about players, great players in Dallas with flaws, and everybody's got them, and they just show up more with social media. We've got a great example. The Mavericks didn't like certain things about Luka Doncic, and what did they do? They traded him. They got rid of him. That had that work out for him. I don't like the idea that Micah Parsons has a podcast. I don't. It doesn't make me comfortable. But I haven't seen any evidence that it is taken away from his performance. And they're all performance-based games, and that's what we have to focus on now. They may not be, they may not fit your view of leadership. They may not fit your old school values for what constitutes a leader. Um, but Micah Parsons is one of the 5 best defensive players in the NFL, one of the 3 best defensive players in the NFL, and that's really the end of the argument there. I don't know if Demarcus Lawrence had said anything to Micah Parsons while he was here. If there was a shot, if this was a shot last week, I don't know if Demarcus said anything to Micah while he was here. I don't know. He certainly didn't say anything publicly about it, and I don't think it's terribly right to go out there now and take shots. Either do it while you're here, or don't. But the bottom line is, this is kind of how the athlete platform and the athlete world has changed, and ownership and teammates have got to accept it. I think a lot of the player stuff comes down to jealousy, because there's nobody who can say Micah Parsons hasn't contributed his value while he's been with the Cowboys.
Well, as Calvin excuse me, Calvin Watkins had pointed out today in a story that he did for the Dallas Morning News, in which he asked this question: do the Cowboys have a Micah Parsons problem? He reminded us, excuse me, that Malik Hooker also brought it up last year, and they had a little dust up about that, and now they're on different sides of the locker room, although they say that has nothing to do with it. So there are players who are going to object to this kind of thing, and I'm with Evan on this. To me, um, yes, I would like him to be a guy who's not going to miss the involuntary workouts, like he has in the past, and Mike has always worked out on his own. If you're going to be, the highest paid player on the team, other than the quarterback, if you're going to be the leader that you're supposed to be on this team, which he should be, and I think in many ways he is a leader. Like, when Demarcus Lawrence said this about they're not going to win, who was the guy that came out and defended the Cowboys? Well, it was Micah Parsons with his comments
Right.
back to Lawrence. So and in my limited exposure to Micah, I've always found him very engaging and very willing to talk after the game. He's he's good with the media. I thought that, of course, Lawrence was as well, but I don't. I don't feel when I'm around Micah Parsons that there's anything disingenuous about him. I feel like that he's trying to give you the truth. I do think that he's a good guy who is obviously a fantastic player. So I don't see a lot of problems with this, other than the fact that maybe you just don't like what he's doing with his workouts and staying away from the building in the off season, that kind of thing. David, what is your take on it?
Yeah, and I don't look. I think the people point to the podcast because it's visible. Um, I don't think that's driving any sort of wedge between him and the players and the others in that locker room. And it is interesting. We're talking about the evolution of sports and coverage and athlete perception. Well, before it was we're not talking about socially visible, because of what a player does now on his limited free time during a season. And I think that point should be made. They're limited free time during a season. Any professional athlete has very limited time that they're not pouring into the sport, preparation for the next game, recovery from an injury. We're catching very small glimpses, about the few glimpses they ever have away from the sport in season for any professional athlete. Now, all that being said, we've gone from that to like, oh my gosh, well, how could this guy go out to this club 2 nights before a game? To Micah has taken it to the next level in that he's a content creator. He is not. He's not. You're not just capturing his free moments. He's sitting there creating content. Now that can create some issues for a team too, and it did with several of his comments this past season. But you cut through all of that. I don't think any player in the locker room really has a problem with the podcast in and of itself. I think their issues are that they hear Micah Parsons talking about leadership all the time, but not exhibiting it. I think the players, are they upset he goes on a podcast? I would argue what caught their attention more was last off season when he was rarely out there. And remember, even in, boy, I talked to him in, so it would have been during OTAs in May, where he was talking, where he readily acknowledged in May that their new defensive coordinator, who was hired in January, they hadn't really sat down and talked. And in fact, he called him Zimmerman for the entire
Yeah,
press conference.
that's
So,
right.
those sort of moments. But again, I think the players, are they upset about the podcast? They can say that. I think what gets them rolling their eyes is last year during OTAs, which are voluntary, and Micah Parsons does not have to be there. But a leadership's going to be there when a leader's going to be there when the rest of the team is, right? You put yourself in environments to show you the sacrifice is shared, and just because you're a key athlete doesn't mean you don't share that sacrifice with them. But I would say that they were more upset, or they noticed that, well, Micah hadn't been here all off season, but you know what? The first hour and a half of OTAs this day were set aside to shoot promos for the big screen at AT&T Stadium. Micah Parsons showed up for that, left as soon as the photo shoot was over, and didn't take part in practice that day because he had other commitments. Those are the things where players and teammates will roll their eyes and go, "Look, you're a great player. Being a great player is enough. Don't act like you're leading us and we're following you. You do your thing. We'll do ours. We So I think sometimes when you feel as the best athlete on a team that you have to project that you're also a leader in something you're not, I think that's where the issues come in. And I think that's where we are with Micah Parsons.
Two quick things there, right, David? I think you bring up a great point. Where players where players can rightfully, and there's petty jealousy, and
Yeah.
then there's
And there's that in there,
idea
sure.
of, you're speaking words, but you're not living those words. And the question I'd have, and clearly players aren't going to negotiate this in the media, but the question I'd have is, have guys gone to him and said, Micah, you are talking about leadership on your podcast, but you're not acting it out in the locker room, and we need that. The second element that I'd bring up is, this as everything, this gets back to the culture the Cowboys have created and committed. I cover a team in which, and look, Chris Young, there's been some outliers here too. Chris Young went out and got Aroldis Chapman, and that was a guy that didn't seem to fit with what I thought was what he defined as a good teammate. It ended up working out okay for the Rangers for a half a year, but he's got a real defined vision of what makes a good teammate, of what fits a good teammate. And I have seen 99% of the moves that he's made be with the idea that this guy may not be the super highest talented player on the market at that position, but he fits what this club's culture is. And if you're gonna speak about a culture, whether you're Micah Parsons as a player doing it, or you're Jerry Jones as an owner doing it, or the former Mike McCarthy as a coach doing it, if you're going to speak about the culture, you got to live the culture. And if you don't, then everything's going to fall apart after that.
And if you don't, you can go to an extreme like the Mavericks and totally uh, rip asunder your franchise because you can't find the proper balance between letting a young player be who he is and develop versus the premium you place on culture. See, I would say there's an acceptable sliding scale within creating a culture, isn't there?
100%.
Because
I've
in
said that to
sports,
myself a million times.
yeah,
Sliding scale.
yeah, and the more important an individual player is to that success, team success, the more latitude he has within that scale. Well, the Mavericks made it very clear they they were viewing more of an absolute scale. So he's outside of the parameter, so we have to move on. It's going to be best for the franchise. I do think, as Jerry Jones likes to say, uh, with numbers, it's fungible. I think Jerry has a more fungible scale on where culture is. And I will say, look, the dynamics of a football locker room are different than others because there's so many more players. It's not just 51 on the active roster. You're having 65, 70, 75 guys in a locker room. They're all alpha males. And if one guy, if your best player isn't an integral part of your leadership structure, I think you can absorb that and still be successful and move on more so in football than you can be in basketball, where that one guy is one of the a generational talent who doesn't buy into everything else you're doing. So I think it's so that's my long-winded way of saying Micah Parsons being outside the parameters of a true leader, I don't think is as destructive to the culture with the Cowboys as Luka Doncic potentially was with the Mavericks, which is kind of what we're hearing. But I will tell you, I mean, there are a lot of look, and it also depends on how how the teammates react. You bring up Micah a lot of times. No one has ripped him publicly because they all respect him as a player. And they do believe he's serious about his craft. No one's questioning that. It's just when he talks about leadership and doing this and that, and you'll ask other players, and before they talk to you on the record, they'll roll their eyes, you know? So there's a thing of like, just let Micah be Micah. Let's not inflame this. He's too good to make this an issue. We know that's in his personality. Let's all just, go.
Well, I'll say this: in an organization where the Joneses both have radio shows during the week, Micah
Yeah.
Parsons fits exactly into the
Yes, he
culture of the
does. Yes.
Cowboys. This is what they've created, and he fits right into it.
But that's not a
And
Micah
just
Parsons
one quick question, David, because we need to get to talk about these other guys that they've added in the last week. So, do you believe that the Cowboys have a Micah problem? Do you believe that Micah Parsons might end up on the trading block?
I don't, because I think they understand what his value is. He's perfectly happy being here. He has said publicly he doesn't have to be the highest paid non quarterback. Now, we'll see how that matches up with how these negotiations go. But no, I think he fits the template. He loves being here. Again, this is that, but it becomes an issue of perception sometimes more than the reality. I don't think he is not dividing the locker room. He is not keeping them from winning. Has he led them to where they need to go? No, but he's certainly not an impediment. He's a big piece of what they could do in breaking that ceiling of the divisional round. I don't see a scenario where he's not back here. I think they carved this out now that CD Lamb and Dak Prescott have those contracts in place. I think they know exactly what they have to work with Parsons. I think they designed the financial nucleus of this team going forward. We have to give X percentage of our cap to these three guys and make it work elsewhere. I would be shocked if Micah Parsons isn't here.
Yeah, this Jerry's not looking to do another Herschel Walker deal. That's just not going to happen with this kind of player.
No, and it's and those are harder to pull off now. And again, uh, just where they are in their roster construction and what he's done, I just don't see any way that you. He has such a great impact even when he doesn't get the numbers. Even when he's not getting the sack, his pass rush win rate is puts him at the top of the league. Even when he's in sacks, he may be behind some other guys.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about the guys that were added in the last week, David. So 10 players in all, and a couple added by trades, and then there were free agents. All of them except Solomon Thomas, the defensive tackle, on 1 year deals, or at least it was in the last year of the contract that they were already enjoying. So going into this, David, let me ask you first this question: would you have thought that they had been this active in free agency?
As as we were writing about and talking about it on the podcast, they were in my mind they were going to be more active. But remember, at this stage last year, free agency, they'd added two players outside the organization. Now they've added 10. So they've been five times as active as what they were last year.
Right.
So they've been a little more active. And you look at the overall numbers, just the 8 free agents they've signed from other teams, that equals the highest number they've had since the early 1990s when Plan B free agency was in effect. And I think it was either 90 or 91, right along in there. They signed 16 players in free agency at this phase. But the difference then was under Plan B, which was only in place for about 3 or 4 years, every team would freeze 37 players on their roster, and everyone else on the roster that wasn't protected was a free agent. So you had much more movement during that 3 to 4 year period than you've ever had since. So this equals the most, and I would argue I count the two trades for Elam and Murray. Uh, Even though they were trades, I count that as part of their free agent acquisition. So that brings it up to 10. So this is I did not think they would be this active. I thought they would sign 6 to 7 and maybe spend a little bit more money on a few other positions rather than just doing the bargain shopping across the board. But they've addressed a lot of their depth issues, and I think they feel they've covered themselves where they can go into the draft next month and be sitting there at 12 or with their first pick in the second round and not have to say, well, we have to take this position because we didn't address it in free agency.
So, in a story that you wrote for, I believe it was yesterday's Dallas Morning News, you mentioned that you believe that Kenneth Murray Jr., the former Oklahoma linebacker, would probably be a starter, as is Kaiir Elam, the cornerback they got from the Bills. Um, and I'm assuming Elam would he just be starting because Trayvon Diggs is not going to be ready at the start of the season, or is he a possibility to play in the nickel with Jordan Lewis leaving?
He said he can play inside, but most of what he's done in the league has been outside. And I would project him as a starter early because Trayvon Diggs is not going to be ready for the start of the season. Now the other part of this is I do believe that the Cowboys are going to address corner in this draft. And I could see them getting a corner that would start ahead of Elam. But if this moment is currently constructed, I think Deron Bland and Elam are you're going to be your two starting corners if the season started today. Now this is both these guys are first round picks, and you can argue well they didn't pan out. I think a lot of times it really works to their benefit and the team's benefit in the second or third stop because those expectations are gone now. No one is expecting Elam to be uh, living to the promise of a first round pick or necessarily Murray. But Murray's been a very productive player in his 5 years in the league. Um, Elam's Elam has seen his time diminish. In fact, in the league so far, I think he's played less than 1,000 defensive snaps in his 3 seasons. Only started 12 games. 6 of them came as a rookie. So he's only started 6 games the last 2 years. And he was a healthy scratch in some games for Buffalo. But Buffalo does have a very good secondary. So and we talked to him yesterday on Monday, and you could tell a lot of it is he just feels, and other people I've talked to feel that he still has the skill and the talent, and he's a good one-on-one defender, a man defender, which they'll play more here now. But that he's just kind of lost his confidence, and it's about building that confidence back up. And if he can do that, I think he'll help them. I will say this: while I think you can look across the league and see a lot of high draft picks that didn't hit their potential in their first stop often did or kind of grew into a better situation in their second when those expectations were removed. I will say anecdotally, it seems to me that happens less with corners who are picked in the first round that move on that find success later. I think you see it more at other positions, and I think some of that's just because of the temperament and constantly being burned out there at that position that others don't have to deal with.
Real quickly before we get out of the Cowboys segment, the question for me a little bit at linebacker, I thought that because of Matt Eberflus's familiarity with Jack Sanborn, that he might end up starting at linebacker and is also known as a good run defender. Is he you think that probably Murray would hold the edge over him going into camp?
Oh, I think Murray, Leofau, and the guy you just mentioned, Sanborn, are going to be very much in the mix at linebacker. Yeah, I
Okay.
think I think both of the linebackers they signed. I think they feel if they hadn't signed these two linebackers, now suddenly on the second day of the draft, when you have a linebacker sitting there, you're saying, well, do we have to go here instead of taking a receiver here or a back here? Now they've eliminated that, and I think they're fine. I would imagine they will take a linebacker in this draft, but I don't see it happening until day 3 because of the moves they made in free agency.
Okay. All right. We'll talk about the draft more next week. We just had to get into that free agency thing because that's what come up now. So this brings us to the Rangers out here in Surprise. They are wrapping up this week, and I'll be out here all week with Evan. We're just going to party the whole time. We're going to be like drunken sailors out here in Surprise, Arizona.
Apologies to the Navy, to the U.S. Navy. We apologize for that, for
Do
Kevin
we
being.
do we have to do that? I didn't realize that was good. I didn't think that they would think that was a slight. I thought that that was a compliment to the U.S. Navy.
They
I'm
would. The
sorry.
question would be, would either one of you actually get through and make it to the level where you could be drunken sailors?
I had a
Yeah,
cocktail last night, Kevin. David.
he did. David, he had a cocktail. I will say this: having never been drunk a day in my life, I probably shouldn't start now. That would probably be a bad idea.
I don't know. Now seems a pretty good time, Kevin.
I don't know. I don't know about
If
that.
not now, when?
Maybe so. All right, so we're out here in Surprise, Arizona, and it's another beautiful day in Surprise. 70 degrees, I think it's supposed to be the temperature, and it's not blowing sand all over the place, and so Evan's appreciative of that. So that's really good. The big question in this camp was basically, what they were going to do with all these pitchers that they had, and now that's not a question so much anymore. With a couple of guys going down, John Gray breaking his wrist on a line drive, caught him on his right wrist, and he'll be out probably. A broken bone basically usually is 6 weeks, so that puts him about when, Evan?
Oh, I think it's going to be more than that. I look at Josh Young kind of as my bellwether here. Josh missed nearly 12 weeks last year, and listen, Kevin, the Rangers. When I asked the Rangers this question about what kind of precedent they have for a pitcher breaking his pitching wrist, they didn't have anybody that they could cite. And when I did research, the only pitchers with broken wrists that I could find were their non-pitching wrists. And so this is that's going to be a real question. And I don't expect John Gray to be a part of the pitching staff for the first 2 months of the year for sure, and maybe not an effective part of the pitching staff at least for the first half.
Wow, that's a blow because he was pitching pretty well.
Was.
And so that's a blow for the rotation. And then of course Cody Bradford, who pitched very well last year. I've always liked the fact that not great stuff, but great command and no fear. He will throw inside. He will spot his pitches. He's a nice rotation piece. And how long do you expect that he will be out?
Well, I think the Rangers said he won't throw for an additional 3 weeks. So that would take us into the first week of April before they reevaluate. But I think what they will do is they get back to Texas the end of this week. I think that Cody will see Keith Meister in Arlington early next week, and we may have an updated schedule then. When I talked to Cody, I don't think he was under the impression that he would need to go a full 3 weeks before he started to throw again. But the Rangers, perhaps based on the length of time it took last year for him to get over the back issue, may decide we'd like to play it a little bit more conservatively on the front side before we test anything out. So there's probably some wiggle room there, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. So what that means is there's a couple of vacancies in the rotation, and the speculation has been that, well, you've got a couple of former first round picks that have been in camp all year.
Well,
Why
that's
not
not
just let them?
speculation. You do have two former first round picks in this camp that are
Well, I
still.
bet that the speculation wasn't they were here, is that they would be the guys that would go step into the rotation.
And I don't at this point. I don't think it should be speculation. I think it should be the way the Rangers go. Um, to David's point, I think as we all get older, we realize that there are sliding scales on all of this stuff. And I just look at it at this point like the Rangers drafted these two guys in 2021 and 2022 with as the top pitcher in each draft.
Who are these guys again? That you
Jack
repeat
Leiter
the name?
and Kamar Rocker.
Thank you.
Um,
In that order?
yes.
Okay.
And it's time. It's time for them to contribute, especially when your option is. And look, Adrian Hauser has pitched really well here in spring training, but Adrian Hauser has 100 big league starts, and he's averaged under 5 innings in 100 big league starts. And he has a 4.5 ERA, a 4.57 ERA in 104 big league starts. And my point here is if you put Adrian Hauser in your rotation, the bar is low. Okay? You're not expecting to get outstanding performance. You're just expecting to hopefully get 5 innings. If you put if you put Rocker and Leiter in the rotation, you may not get those 5 innings every time. But the possibility is that you're going to get some outstanding stuff and some outstanding results. And I think the most important thing for those two guys' growth is that they need a little bit of runway to pitch consistently. They haven't had that yet in the big leagues. They need a little bit of runway to pitch, make adjustment from start to start, and go forward. And you have that luxury right now because you don't have any better choices. You may have choices that are equal, but that's at the top side. The top side for Rocker and Leiter is front of the rotation starters. So for me, it is not a question. I think if you're the Rangers, you're going through all the mental exercises and you're doing everything to make sure you're not overlooking anything. But for me, the way I sit here, I feel this is time. Go.
Yeah, here and I hear all that, and I think that in a perfect world, that's all true. I know that as we were having dinner last night, a big league scout came up and started talking to Evan. Evan didn't really know who he was, didn't know who he really worked for, didn't know any of that, but he did know he had some vague reference to the guy, and the guy. We brought that question up. He said, "Yeah, sink or swim. Here we go." And so I get that's the that's the feeling in a perfect world. My problem is that so far neither Leiter nor Rocker has done anything to suggest that he is ready to start a big league game right now. Now, obviously, both of them have pitched in the big leagues already, but they have not been they have not been successful this spring. I've not seen anything to suggest that they could get when we talk about whether Adrian Hauser has gotten to the fifth inning. They're having a hard time getting out of the first, or the second, or the third. Leiter and Rocker are. So I'm just a little bit hesitant to think that that right now that they are the answer. Now I know that there are other issues here. If you start the season with Hauser, he's not on the 40 man and all of that, and you're going to have to make adjustments, and it's going to be more, salary, and we're on the apron, and all these horrible, horrific things that the Rangers do not want to expose themselves to. But I don't see the benefit of throwing these guys out here. And if they were to start the season with the results that they've gotten this spring, I don't see that does anybody any good. So I don't want to put too much into spring results because you always would hear, oh yeah, I'm just tinkering with something here. It's what you always hear from pitchers when they have a bad game, and sometimes that's right, and sometimes it's not. but I don't see the upside of doing that with them. I'd rather send them down. If Hauser makes 3 or 4 starts, and then you see that either a Rocker or Leiter is really starting to pitch well at that point, and then you decide to bring them up. That's one thing. Also, I wouldn't have a problem if it was just one of the two Vandy boys, right? Uh, Putting both of them into the rotation when they are both almost identical in the kind of problems they're having, that they're not commanding their pitches, and when they're not commanding their pitches, they're getting rocked. Then that's also an issue for me.
Yeah, I just disagree. I think that it is the hardest thing for a team that's a contender to do is to develop young players because they usually feel like they can't afford to give players long runs to develop. The Rangers I don't consider Adrian Hauser to be a better choice. I think at the top side, he could give them a little bit more predictability than these guys will, but I don't consider him to be a better choice. And I think at the outset of the season, with the ability to continually rotate some long guys and piggyback some guys, which I think would be the Rangers' approach. And I think that they would act to move Leiter and Rocker out of games sooner rather than later. So they might go 3 or 4 innings and they might be backed up by another guy going 3 innings. I think that it gives you the opportunity for these guys to get experience that they need, and to learn and to grow and to be in a position to really contribute this year. There's nothing for Jack. I know Jack Leiter's numbers weren't outstanding at Round Rock last year, but he was the Pacific Coast League Pitcher of the Year. He was the best pitcher in that league according to whoever votes for that. And I don't know that there's a whole lot of challenge for him to go back down there and get. If you wanted to say that Kamar Rocker only had whatever it was, I think it was 45 or 48 innings total last year, and he could use a handful more starts, and you went with Leiter and say say Hauser in the rotation. And I'm all for Adrian Hauser making this team as a long reliever. I just think that you need to go with the upside guys in the rotation. I think you need to take the guys who are part of your future and put them in the rotation more than saying we just need to weather this storm.
Well, clearly you're wrong. So, David, we're going to go to you as the tiebreaker on this thing. What would you do?
I'm sorry, what were y'all talking about? I would look. It's early in the season. I think sometimes top prospects can hit a ceiling, and you need to give them a taste of what it can be for them to reach their potential. And I would think early in this season, with the pitching issues you have, I would try to get both some work early in the season. Now, you're not stubborn about it. I mean, if you have a couple of starts and it's not working out, move on. But I would not be adverse to giving both of those guys a couple of starts early in the season, because I do think sometimes when young top prospects plateau, just giving them a taste of, look, this is what's still there. You can do it. This is what, this is, you can get there. This is what it's going to be like, can kind of help some of those guys mentally. So I would, that's the way I would approach it. But again, with a very quick hook.
Absolutely. And I will just say this. They're going to learn more from failure at this point than they will, or they'll benefit more from some failure at this level than they will going down to AAA and pitching 5 or 6 innings down there and dominating those hitters.
And if they don't, they're never going to make it, right? If
Right.
they don't learn from the failure here, then you. I, I still say at this point in their development, this also helps you as an organization get a better read on just where they are and can you count on them going forward. So that's the other reason I would justify to do this.
Well, clearly you're wrong
See
too,
you later,
David.
Kevin. Bye-bye.
That's the most ignorant case I've ever heard made on this podcast. But anyway, that's all right. We're moving on from that. Um,
You can't see us dropping the mic, but Evan and I are dropping the mic right now on the podcast.
wow, that's what the listeners would hope you would do is drop the mic and leave it
And never come
on
back.
the floor and never come back to the
I,
microphone.
I don't know, Kevin. I am having a hard time because it seems to me like you are. I mean, from my perspective, it seems like you're aiming low, and I don't think that's what this team should ever aim for.
No, I think that is not the evident would be. I know what the potential of these two guys
You're
is.
just saying they haven't deserved it, so you shouldn't
Yeah,
give them
yeah.
that chance
I
because
don't
they
want
haven't
them to
deserved
hand
it.
them something that they haven't earned. Just because you were a top 5 pick doesn't mean that okay. Well, then now here you go. That it's not like that's happened before. There have been plenty of cases where first round picks just didn't pan out,
Where does this
and
team stand?
I don't see my issue of it is that sending them down is not a question of to me are they going to go down and dominate. We're talking about guys who have not refined their pitching. They're still not they're not throwing with command. When you're not throwing with command, you're going to get lit up, and that's the thing. I think if these guys go out there and do like what recently Jack Leiter did in the start, he had 5 strikeouts and he had 5 walks. I mean that's disastrous. Or when the ball's leaving the bat at 110 miles an hour, hit after hit, that's disastrous. So I don't see that from Adrian Hauser. I just want from Adrian Hauser competence at this point. This is a team that is hoping to get back into the playoffs and is one of the favorites, going into this season in the American League. So I think that to me, I'm not thinking about what's good for these two guys. I'm thinking about what's the best thing for this club right now to win games. And I think to me, Adrian Hauser gives them a better chance to win games at the start of the season. That doesn't mean he's going to be doing that at the middle of the season or at the end of the season. But to start out, yeah, I think I would go with that. So we'll see. I don't know. I don't have a good handle on. I don't think Evan does either about exactly what the Raiders are going to do. I don't doubt that one of those guys will probably be in the opening day rotation.
I don't see any way that one of those guys isn't.
Yeah,
I think the
right.
question is whether or not there's two. And look, I think this is in large part, Kevin. I think this is the conversation that the Rangers are having right now and are having on a daily basis. And I think there are people in the organization who are playing the role that you've just said, and I think there are people in the organization who are playing the role that that David and I have just so eloquently stated. And it's going to come down to ultimately it's going to come down to Chris Young and his feel on that.
All right. Okay. Hopefully Chris will side with me on this. I'm going to talk to him about it anyway. See if I can get him to agree with me.
Chris is trying to build a culture, something you don't care about.
That's right. I don't care about culture. If it's going to cause you to trade away a generational player, no. I vote against culture. No culture. Okay, that's going to do it for the Rangers segment of our podcast. We're going to move over and talk about those Mavericks now. Mike Curtis covers the Mavericks for the Dallas Morning News. I wrote a story today that says, should Anthony Davis play again this season? And he kind of went over the ins and outs of that, the yeses and nos of whether he should be coming back from that adductor strain. All indications are that he could play. My vote is no, that the fewer guys you play, Gafford, Daniel Gafford, Derek Lively II, no. Don't bring any of them back. Let them all just sit out the rest of this season. Play those 8 guys. If you got to bring, I guess they can't bring up anybody at this point. Whatever you have to do to keep 8 players eligible, yeah, I'll do that. But this team is not going anywhere in the playoffs. If it holds on to that 10th position, it's going to end up having to play the Oklahoma City Thunder. That would really be ugly to see that. So I think that at this point, I don't want to see them bring back Anthony Davis. Even as good as it would be to get a little bit of chemistry built up and maybe give fans something to hope for, I think that this fan base has had enough. You should call this season a close. David?
Completely disagree with you there, Kevin. No, look, I understand what you're saying. I mean, this team's one. I guess maybe by default it could win a play in and get in. I mean, it's going to be in the play in. I mean, they have the gap over Phoenix now, and it's not like Phoenix is playing lights out. Um, this team may stumble into the playoffs, even though it doesn't want to. But and I, I'm not usually in a guy. I'm not usually in favor of not playing someone if they can play, and if physically he is cleared. I think because of all the other things that have gone down with this trade. Um, and look, this no matter what Anthony Davis does, if he comes back or not, I understand the overall pall and outrage that the trade put over this fan base is not going to go away entering next season. It's still there. But I think it's in Davis's best interest and the club's best interest for him to get back out there if he's healthy to show that, look, I want to be here. I want to play. This is what I can do. I'm committed to this franchise. Let's go. I think it'll be good for him individually. And I think it would at least take some of the edge, a very slight edge, but some of the edge off of the fan base anger going into the off season. Otherwise, I just think it goes exponentially the other way because it's like, really, you got a guy here. You played 2.5 quarters, and now we're watching Luka in the second and third round of the playoffs.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that in theory, but the problem is that we thought that Anthony Davis was cleared to play when he got here, and or actually shortly after he got here, and he gets out there and he lasts for 2.5 quarters. I think the question always with Anthony Davis is how long is he going to be able to stand up? So for me, yeah, I get what you're saying. We need to preserve some of the integrity of the game. If these guys are, healthy enough to play and exert a reasonable effort, then yeah, then we probably should see them do that. I just feel like that this with Anthony Davis, there's always going to be a question of how healthy he is. That's just what his career has been for the most part. It's why he earned the nickname Street Clothes because he's so often sitting on the bench.
Because he's so well dressed. It's not his
So well
actual
dressed.
wardrobe. It's the
Exactly. So I do think it's an issue for me. Evan, do you have a thought about it?
Yeah, I've listened to both your cases, and my ruling in the tiebreaker is I see both your points, and I'm not sure I can vote one way or another. I think they're both really legitimate points here.
That's unacceptable. Get off the fence. Come on.
I mean, in general, I am not a tank guy. I mean, I think that you owe it to your fan base to try to win, and I think you owe it to your organization to try to win. I think the best possible outcome long term for the Mavericks is for them to get the best possible draft pick that they can. But I just don't see anything. I think if Anthony Davis comes back, Kevin, I don't see this making a significant difference for this team one way or another. So I guess if I'm leaning one way or another, I'd probably lean towards him coming back. I don't think it's really going to hurt their draft situation.
Oh, I think he makes a difference, and I don't know that. Yeah, look, I haven't run the numbers here to see, if they lose this many games, they move up this far. They're going to be in the back half of the lottery. But you just never can tell if it's one spot or two spots. How much difference does that make? Now they made the trade, last year to get Derek Lively Jr. That they traded back and got that pick. So that was that was a very valuable pick. Obviously, look what he turned into. You can still get a good player at that point. I don't want to see him jeopardize anything at this point. But the I guess if you're talking about falling out of the playoffs, if you weren't going to make the playoffs at all, then it wouldn't make any sense at all to bring him back at that point. If it's a question of whether you want to, if you're going to be, if you're right there on the edge of that, then yeah, I can see the point. It's just that in my estimation, when I look at it, it's like when you look back when the very first things when players we were talking about tanking, back in the 80s, when that became popular, and that's why we came up with the lottery in the first place, was that by losing those games, these the Houston Rockets got some unbelievable players because of it. And so that's not going to happen in this case, and that's not the difference.
You know what I think the solution needs to be here? In all honesty, I think the solution needs to be that the Mavericks need to really do whatever they can to poll the general public. And I'm not saying, run a poll because that's not going to be scientific. But I think in this case, the Mavericks need to do whatever the answer is that's going to resonate most with their fans. They need to put the fans first here. And if that means running a bad team out there, okay. If it means putting Anthony Davis out there and trying to win, okay. But I think the Mavericks need to take into consideration how badly they screwed up with their fans and at least put the fan perspective as a priority going forward for the rest of this miserable season.
Well, there's no question. Look, as much as we've seen people say, fire Nico at games and chanting this stuff, and you've got PJ Washington yelling back at fans during games, which is a really crazy dynamic. There are, as Mike Curtis pointed out, 15, 16,000 people who are still coming out there to watch the Mavericks win, right? I'm interested to see here going forward how many season tickets will be lost over all this, right? I would imagine probably they might have, I'm just going to guess and say maybe 1,000 fewer season tickets sold going into next season than this season. That's a statement, and that's obviously a loss of income, but it's also telling you that as mad as everybody is, they still want to watch the Mavericks and they still want to see them win. So I don't have any doubt about that. As much as the anger has mounted over all this, and rightfully so, I don't think that there's a feeling that people are going to just that the majority of the fan base is going to just pull the plug on the team. That's not happening. So I do think that it will be very interesting to see what they do in the off season, and that's one of the reasons why you hear people saying fire Nico. Neither Tim Cowlishaw nor I has written anything indicating that they should fire him over what happened with Luka Doncic. I think that we have certainly voiced our opinions and said that it was a bad move, a terrible move, one of the worst trades in NBA history, and certainly the worst trade in the Dallas sports market, which is really saying something. But he did make moves that got the team to the Western Conference Finals 3 years ago and to the NBA Finals last year. I want to see what he's going to do with this team now in this coming off season, and how he's going to construct things, the moves they're going to make, who they're going to add in the draft, and see what he can do with that, and see if he can build this team back to what he said he was going to do. I think this ownership group is going to give him that runway to do that, at least for a couple of years, and then we'll see if things really start to go bad and their numbers really are impacted in their season ticket base. And I think that these owners are probably only concerned about the financial aspects of the team, and then we'll see whether the Adelson family sticks with it at that point. But that's all to be determined at this point. All right, that's going to do it for our podcast this week. We thank you for tuning in with us, and we'll be back next week, and we'll talk more about what's happened at training camp going into the Rangers season. We'll have a better focus on what the Cowboys might do in the draft, talk about that a little bit, and then just to see what's going on with these Mavericks as they flail out of this season. What it started out as a very promising thing and has now ended up on its back. So from everybody in here to everybody out there, thanks, and we'll see you next time.